Welcome back to the Executive Outlook. Today's guest is a data and analytics leader who has worked across some of the UK's largest organizations and has seen firsthand what happens when data grows without structure and what it takes to fix it. James has led data modernization and analytics program across multiple industries, helping organizations move from fragmented or organically grown data environments to well-structured platforms that actually drive business well. Today, we are going to dig into the real story behind data modernization, why it is needed, what the journey looks like on the ground, and what the business impact look when it is done right. James, welcome to the Executive Hour. Really glad to have you with us today.
Thank you for the introduction, Isha. Yeah, very happy to be here.
So I'm very excited to know more about you, that how it got started into the field of data and analytics for you and what your career looked like.
I never intended to follow a technical career. I studied history and politics at university, and I never thought that would translate into a technical career. But I've always had a restless curiosity in me. And I think as the .com boom was happening, I really wanted to understand how, that all the websites were being built and how they kind of came together. And, I kind of started to teach myself some of these technical skills, HTML programming and things like that. And that just led to then developing a really deep interest in technology from nowhere, really. And, I quickly switched from a humanities kind of discipline to a technical discipline at university. I completed a master's in IT. And from there, my career kind of just kicked off, really. And I've spent sort of 20, 25 years now pretty much doing every job there is in data and leading teams doing those jobs as well. And as you said in your introduction, I've worked at some of the UK's largest financial services organizations and had a fantastic time doing it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So can you share some of the use cases of data in the large organization? How the data-driven decision really help businesses?
Yeah, across that 20 years, I've seen data develop and grow as a capability and as a business asset, if you like. But as I say, most of my experience has been in financial services. And much of my early career was focused on compliance and regulatory outcomes, associated with lending and deposits and things like that. So a lot of the early use cases were around, are we making the right lending decisions? Is our credit performance moving in the right direction? Are we safe and secure? And, are we meeting the regulatory commitments that we've made? And can we evidence those to the regulator? So very much about control, compliance, prudent banking, if you like. I've definitely seen a shift as the financial institutions move from kind of high street presence to digital and mobile banking. And the focus is shifting, whilst all the compliance and regulatory stuff is still there, it's still a requirement, there's now a growing demand for better understanding of drivers of customer acquisition and retention, customer behavior analysis. What insight can we drive from all those data points that we're catching when a customer interacts with one of our websites or one of our banking apps or other kind of online touch points? So it's really starting to drive that understanding of customer behavior that can then help inform better product decisions, better service decisions. How can we design and develop products and services that customers truly need and truly searching for? So, there's a big shift, I think, from that kind of compliance focus to actually how can we drive some value and really develop a compelling proposition.
Okay. So when the data grows organically and get out of the hand, so how it look like and what is the biggest problem we face as an organization?
I think data as a discipline is still a maturing capability in many organizations and still some way behind the IT discipline that's kind of started this technology drive, really. If you think about IT operating models and IT operations been in place for 60, 70 years in most large organizations, data as a discipline in its own right is only really emerged in the last 20, 25 years, I'd say. And I think because of that, the understanding of how data organizations should be designed and set up is still maturing and still growing. So I think there's a lot of limited understanding, I think, of how this stuff really hangs together and needs to work together. So when I've seen data function grow organically in large organizations is generally being because of a lack of understanding of those entities and a lack of understanding what it takes to drive or deliver data outcomes at scale. I can think of one large organization I've worked for in the past where they've had a desire to build out an enterprise kind of warehouse, but really without understanding how users are going to interact and engage with that service, and a lack of operating models to enable that service to continue to develop and grow as requirements change. And as a consequence, then business teams have gone off and built their own independent services because the centralized service is not meeting their needs. This particular organization, I think they've developed 5 or 6 competing data warehouses and data teams, and all of a sudden you've gone from a well-controlled central capability to 300 or 400 people supporting 5 or 6 major data warehouses, each with slightly different definitions of data and each needing the same maintenance when the upstream systems are changing. And all of a sudden, your cost base is kind of grown astronomically. But that's quite often hidden and accepted tax on the business almost. So I think if those organizations took a step back and looked at, what a well-organized enterprise operating model looks like, you'd find some pretty significant synergies and opportunities to really consolidate capability across the organization.
Absolutely agreed with you, because we have a different copies and we don't know from which data warehouse we need to take that, because every single data warehouse has a different definition and the business don't know which one to pick.
You have credit risk teams that understand lending default in one way, and you have finance teams and accountants that model and understand defaults in a different way. They're both really trying to come to the same outcome, but different regulations or industry definitions driving slightly different definitions. So, it's quite common. I think the other pattern is I've seen warehouses that are built on engineering principles, when the end users try and come to use those and interact with those data models, for example, dimensional data models, they don't really understand how they work. And if they don't have the right support from the data teams, that's when they go off and do their own thing. So, it really has to, data warehouse has to come with, or data platforms have to come with, a broader operating model that encourages education and literacy and understanding to really drive the value from them.
So what are the signs to a business that it needs a modernization in its data infrastructure?
I think that can vary based on the organization, really, but it's when your business questions are becoming more sophisticated and harder to answer, either because you haven't consolidated the right data, you don't have the right levels of data, maybe you're not getting data at the right pace, keep pace with business needs. Questions kind of become more time critical, time sensitive. Your batch processes might not keep up with demand for them. You might not have the technology capability to drive the deep learning required to answer some of these business questions. So I think that's probably an indicator that you need to think about your technology slightly differently. Or the other opportunity really is around automation. Data is a great enabler of automation, provided you have data in the right place at the right time. And if you're missing out on those opportunities, or you don't have the infrastructure to enable those opportunities, so you really want to start thinking about how to do, what technology is required.
And when we implement the data modernization projects, so what the journey really looks like on the ground, or you can say some surprises organization face when they start?
I think the biggest surprise tends to be how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. I think there's kind of an expectation nowadays that if there's an app in the App Store, you just press download and in three seconds you're ready to go and start using it. Well, that might be true if you don't want to integrate your systems. That might be true if you don't care about security. That might be true if you don't care about your principles of governance and management. But actually, if you're a financial institution, you do care about all those things, or any kind of organization. And the biggest surprise is always how long it's going to take, how much work's involved, and how much it's going to cost. Think about to a recent project that I've just finished, actually. The journey for that end-to-end build out of a data platform includes, obviously, a fair amount of analysis and scoping to really understand what the business drivers are, what's the business outcome that we're trying to achieve, making sure that we're anchored in that and validate and test the capabilities meeting those outcomes. a significant amount of design work to make sure that the principles, the frameworks, and the architecture, if you like, is going to serve those business outcomes. And then, fairly traditional kind of set of activities to build out the infrastructure, build out the networking and security requirements, build out your CI/CD pipelines, deploy your technology, whether that's Databricks, Snowflake, Fabric, whatever it is, and then to put in the engineering frameworks that will stand you in good stead to operate the platform effectively, efficiently, and with good quality data. So that's the kind of work that needs to happen to build out these platforms, and that's before you've even started building out your data pipelines. I mean, there's obviously a lot of parallel activities there that you can run parallel, but it's a significant amount of work to ensure that what you build is integrated with your organization, aligned to the security principles that your IT function is trying to roll out across an organization, and that the engineers can support it in a sustainable and resilient fashion. And all that, I think, biggest challenge is really managing senior expectations. That's the work that needs to happen and needs to be funded and needs to be prioritized.
Yes. And what about the after migration, modernization thing? So to match up the data, what it was there in the previous environment versus the new environment, so that the business can have the trust on the data that, hey, all of the modernization happened as is expected. So what are your thoughts on the topic? Have you faced any challenge around it before?
I think it comes back to what was the business driver, what was the motivation, or what business outcome were you trying to achieve in putting the platform in place? So in a highly regulated industry like financial services, it might be to serve some of those regulatory and compliance type requirements. We need to trust in our data, we need transparency in our data, and therefore the platform's got to enable that transparency that then delivers the trust. Perhaps to one area of the value that you see. Secondly, you might want to be bringing in more data, integrating data at different speeds and multiple sources, and that can to answer business questions. Again, just think back to the project I've just run. One of the prime motivations of that project was I think the organization had something like 300 business questions that they were unable to answer without significant effort. And the real test for us was actually, could we build a platform and a data pipeline roadmap? I think that's why it's always key to start with that business outcome phase to the outset, so that you can continually evaluate whether you're moving towards those outcomes or not. So there could be, a number of different drivers really for building these platforms, and that results in a number of different outcomes: greater trust, greater insights, greater resilience. I mean, resilience is key, particularly if you're serving regulatory requirements or external reporting requirements. Having that resilience and confidence in the system is key.
So anyone who wants to start the journey of the modernization in their organization, what is one piece of advice that you want to give to them before initiating any data modernization project?
I do think it comes back to that clarity on the business purpose. Why would a non-technical stakeholder want to invest in your program or project to modernize? It has to be grounded in a business need. That might be, we have a business strategy that wants to grow our customer base, and we need deep insight into what customers need. Our external reporting is not fit for purpose. So it's really about having clarity of purpose, and then building that story and working with your sponsors to make sure that they're committed to it and that they understand the journey that's required and the cost and commitment from their teams. So I think, before you even start designing and planning, start with a story. Make sure you've got a really good story and that there's commitment to deliver it, and everyone knows why we need to manage it at the end of it. I think the second element to that would be make sure your technical teams are involved in the process and that they remain focused on those business outcomes as they go through the journey. I've seen that happen quite a few times where, they get lost in technical perfection maybe without really taking a step back to think, well, actually, is this really helping us to achieve the outcome or not? I think making sure that, they understand why they're doing the work, that they have a voice in how it's done, and that they remain focused on the outcome.
And as per your experience, what are the positive outcomes you have seen in a business when they have undergone through the modernization of their infrastructure?
I think if it's done right, and if it's done in line with the right operating model principles, what it should deliver is a data capability that has the right capacity and capability to keep pace with business demands for insight or reporting. I've seen that done really well in some organizations, and I've seen there be gaps in other organizations. And I think back to the earlier example I kind of shared, where an organization had built a great data warehouse, so had not put the right operating model in place around it. And the consequence was that business data teams went off and built their own systems, and they're kind of growing these communities of data practitioners. The project we just finished actually did put that operating model in place, and as a consequence, the business reporting demands being balanced with having the right technical capability to deliver on them and to do that at pace. I think it's really about having the right, building the right capacity and capability that then the business feel that they're able to get the responses and the service that they need at the right point in time, whether that is to drive an acquisition strategy, whether that is to give confidence and how many customers an organization has, or what's the valuation of a business based on the insight that is being generated. There's a whole host of reasons why you've gone that journey. Really, the outcome is that you've delivered the capacity and capability to serve those business strategies.
Amazing. Thank you so much, James. It is a really insightful conversation, and thank you for sharing your experience, your thinking, and the lessons you have picked along the way around modernization and data organizations.
Thank you, Isha.